Okay. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuge of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tepid tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Most of us, I would assume, are familiar with Emma Lazarus's The New Colossus. For those of you who are not, this is the poem that sits at the base of our Statue of Liberty. If you've ever driven through a major city in the United States, you have faced these huddled masses. You may have asked yourself questions like, how many homeless people are there? Is this getting worse? And these questions are valid. We get closer to solving these problems when we're willing to talk about them. Today, I'm going to answer some of the top questions that come up when discussing homelessness. Imagine this. You're driving in downtown Sacramento on I Street. You're passing all the shops, the restaurants, and finally you're passing Cesar Chavez Park. At first glance, you assume that there's an event going on because there are so many people in the park. And then as you sit at the light, you get a better look and realize that all of these people are homeless, or better said, houseless. The park is their home. What question comes to your mind? When I first came to Sacramento in 2017, the question that came to my mind was, how many homeless people are there? According to California State University's 2019 Point in Time report, the number of people estimated to be experiencing homelessness in Sacramento is 5,570 on any given night. 4,150 of these people are unsheltered, tasked to find safe locations to park a car, pitch a tent, or lay a sleeping bag. I recognize that it can be hard to visualize numbers that are being thrown at you in a speech, so I will give you a visual. The average school bus can hold 48 adults. If you were to take all of the homeless people in Sacramento that are accounted for in this California study, it would take 116 school buses. I couldn't even fit 116 school buses on this page. As we look to expand our scope, these numbers increase. The U.S. Housing Department prepared the 2020 Annual Homeless Assessment Report to Congress. In this report, Megan Henry and collaborators write that in California, 135,771 people experience homelessness. Nationwide, 580,466 people, about 18 for every 10,000. These numbers are hard to comprehend. 500,000 people. To further put this into perspective, how many of you have visited the new Golden One Center? It's pretty big. On their website, they state that the capacity of the arena is 17,608. If we were to do some simple math here, it shows that it would take roughly 33 of these arenas at full capacity to fit the amount of homeless people we have in the United States. And now these numbers are 1 to 2 years old. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, 2021's count has been canceled. Looking at the numbers from previous years detailed in HUD's report, California alone had a 6.8% increase in homelessness in between 2019 and 2020. Given the loss of jobs and other unprecedented circumstances of 2020 during the pandemic, you can imagine that there will be even more people found experiencing homelessness when these counts resume. That brings us to the next question that we're all thinking. Well, why don't they go to shelters? This is obviously not a cut and dry question. Each person that experiences homelessness is going to have a different answer. But looking from a statistical standpoint, there's just not enough shelters in Sacramento to be able to accommodate the amount of people that need them. Matthew Nuttall from ABC 10 Sacramento writes a 2019 article showing that there are 1,420 beds available in Sacramento County shelters. At the bottom of this article, Nuttall provides a breakdown of all the shelters' names and how many beds they contain. If each of these beds were filled each night, there would still be an estimated 4,150 people unable to find shelter here in the city of Sacramento. Getting into one of these shelters is not always easy. I contacted an old friend of mine from my days working with the homeless, and I asked him what kind of difficulties he's faced while trying to find a shelter. First of all, he told me that many shelters don't accept men. Families with a husband, wife, and kids may be separated because the shelters housing women and children won't take the husband. And if one of the children are male over the age of 14, he may be unable to attend the shelter with his mother and siblings, leaving the family with two options, be separated or all be unhoused together. Many of these shelters don't accept pets. They require guests to be fully off of drugs, including medications to help kick other addictions. They don't take a guest if they have too many possessions, say a cart with food supply, cooking gear, etc. My friend, who asked to not have his name disclosed, said that he had to walk several miles to a shelter only to find that it was full and he needed to walk to the next one. He told me, sometimes I run out of daylight before I can find one that can take me. After hearing firsthand accounts like this, I asked myself, what are the government programs, churches, organizations, what are they doing? Aside from shelters and organizations like Sacramento Steps, aside from shelters, organizations like Sacramento Steps Forward, employees and navigators who are set up in locations to meet with homeless people and connect them with resources. In 2017, I worked with the Sacramento Steps Forward navigator to assist a young man that I met while feeding the homeless. His name was Robert Bailey. He was 27 years old at the time, a heart of gold, and had been experiencing homelessness since he was 18. I struggled to find resources for Robert, but I was told that the navigators would be helpful. Unfortunately, the navigators were really hard to find. I finally located one deep inside the Sacramento Public Library, third floor, and it was an over 2-hour wait to speak to him because so many other homeless people were sitting in there waiting to speak to him as well. It was really difficult to keep Robert, who I kind of suspect was suffering from some mental health issues, inside the building for that long. And when I finally sat down with the navigator, he laid out the reality of the situation. For shelters, transitional housing, mental health care facilities, it was at least a 2-year wait. To even enter the system, people like Robert would need copies of their social security cards and a valid state ID. For Robert, this was nearly impossible. Throughout the time that I knew him, he was frequently the victim of assault and robbery. So this just consistently left him without resources. Other organizations such as the Mercy Peddlers, Clothes and Food for Everyone, Foods Not Bombs, the Community Dinner Project are ran by community members and community donations, so not the city. For a year, I ran one of these groups with my best friend. We were called Healthy Helpings. We provided meals, food, and toiletries in the city every Wednesday. I think in total, we raised maybe $500 throughout the year. Most of the items were either donated directly by people or I bought them myself. When I started feeding the homeless, I was shocked to find out that what I was doing was illegal. I legally could not feed people without paying an exorbitant amount of money to have a health inspector inspect all of our meals. And even if I was somehow able to raise that amount of money, I still would only be able to do 5 events a year per their rules. So I continued to risk it. And for roughly 52 weeks, our group was able to guarantee that 75 to 100 people in Sacramento did not go to bed hungry. I am not alone in this experience. Still to this day, many of these organizations still operate illegally to provide meals, water, hand washing station, all of that kind of stuff to people that live downtown. Larger legal organizations like Loaves and Fishes, according to their website, feed over 800 people daily and provide other services like showers or education. If you compare these numbers to the number of meals that are needed in a day and the number of people that are experiencing homelessness, you can see that these efforts are just a drop in a bucket. Every day, those needs reset, and yet these resources provided to these organizations and programs don't. So another question I asked myself while handling food was, what else are these people facing? I knew that the difficulties were, keeping fed, but what I didn't realize were all the other difficulties. For one, Sacramento currently has an ordinance commonly referred to by advocates as the No Camping Ordinance. This ordinance states that it is unlawful and a public nuisance for any person to camp, occupy camp facilities, or use camp paraphernalia in the following areas, both private and public property. Without any nuances or established safe spaces, this ordinance permits anyone experiencing homelessness to have survival gear seized by police at any time. What is deemed as survival gear is pillows, blankets, tents, tarps, etc. No matter even if it's the winter. Those living on the streets in Sacramento also face a restroom shortage. In March 2018, the city of Sacramento prepared a document and map displaying the 83 public restrooms that operate within the city limits. Many of these are miles and miles apart, and only 23 of them provide 24/7 access. Restaurants and stores have adjusted their policies so that you have to purchase something to be able to use the restroom. And And those would only be open during business hours anyways. So if you needed to use the restroom in the middle of the night, you're going to have to walk miles and miles to the restroom. Most of the time, people don't end up doing that. Typical spots that people on the streets choose to sleep are business doorways, public benches, anywhere with an overhang to keep out the elements. In recent years, cities have installed what people have called anti-homeless architecture. And this includes bars along benches, spikes lining the walkways and business alcoves, bricks stacked in front of windows. This forces homeless people to keep moving and look for other places to sleep away from public locations. But as I mentioned earlier, the public parks, which tend to be very popular, they are given business hours. So they close at dark. And if anybody is left there, they're subject to arrest. The topic of homelessness can be a very sensitive, overwhelming, and overly politicized topic. It is a multifaceted topic which does not have one clear solution. I intended to use a section of this speech to address the costs associated with homelessness. As I searched through dozens of documents detailing the city and state budgets and adding up the number of bills reported to organizations, I found myself losing touch with the humanity and reality of the homeless crisis. The truth is that there's not just one resource where you can find all of that information. Not even the US Housing Department has compiled how much it really costs in total. The important information that can be found exists within these communities. Homelessness is a topic that can be a great unifier. From Portland, Maine to Los Angeles, California, homelessness is an everyday occurrence. Most people in the United States will never experience homelessness firsthand, and they may never get the opportunity to talk to somebody who's experienced it either. Thousands of people all over the city, the country, experience extreme weather, food and water shortages, lack of public restrooms and showers, and go without a safe place to lay their heads. It may not be our responsibility as individuals to solve this crisis, but I do believe that it's our responsibility as human beings to listen to what this experience is. Thanks.